Parasite has no heroes or villains. It merely exposes the inhumanity of the wealthy and the poor. I'm Jonathan Hetterly. This is Psych Cinema. In today's episode, we're going to look at Parasite, specifically looking at the psychology of privilege. We're going to look at structural inequality and then wrap it up on the topic of social mobility. But before we get started, do me a favor, subscribe to our channel. So I recently saw Parasite, Bong Joon-ho's most recent film. He is a filmmaker that I greatly admire. He's done Snowpiercer, The Host, he did Okja, but he's always been a director that I've had mixed feelings about. He throws out ambitious big themes, but I don't think he always sticks the landing. But here in Parasite, I cannot deny that this is a masterpiece of a film, specifically because it blends genres while tackling larger themes, specifically the psychology of the wealthy and the impoverished. And so I want to dive right in talking about the Park family, a wealthy family, and then the Kim family, a very impoverished family, which is ironic because I'm adopted, but my birth last name is Park, and I have a brother who's also adopted, and his birth name is Kim. So maybe this is a family story I wasn't even aware of.
We are family.
But let's dive in. Before we do, spoiler alert, we're going to be diving into some specific details about this film. So if you haven't seen Parasite, what are you waiting for? Pause this video, go out and see it, then come back and watch the rest of this video. But let's first talk about the psychology of privilege, because it's really subtle in this film, but when it hits, you recognize how these two worlds of the affluent and the poor really have difficulty seeing the world through each other's lens. So when we think about the Park family, they are very wealthy and well-to-do, and late in the film, one of the Kim family's son, who's been tutoring her, there's a birthday party, and there's a lot of wealthy families and upper echelon folks around her house, and he scans the party and he asks her, "Do I fit in here?" And the daughter looks at him, and it registers that she never had any type of thought about that. Like, do you fit in? And she says, kind of in a timid way, like, yeah. And in some ways, that just kind of highlights that chasm that's not spoken between the wealthy and the poor of belonging, to where the wealthy, in this case, the Park family, they just go about their lives not really thinking a lot about the impact of their lives, what it must be like with other people. And so you even see that when they're just unaware of what happens in people's lives, how it impacts the wealthy and the poor in different ways. You see that specifically with the great torrential downpour in the film, which is a key pivotal element in the film, because it really inconveniences the Park family, who are off to go do a camping trip for the son's birthday party. And this great storm, it basically makes the camping trip a wash, no pun intended. And so they find it inconvenient that it's disrupted their camping trip, so they have to come home, and then the young son just camps out in a teepee out on their front lawn. It's an inconvenience for them. But you see for the Kim family, this torrential downpour, the devastation that it has in their life, to the point where their home, which is half beneath the ground, is pretty much washed away. The community around them is washed away, and they eventually wake up and they're in sort of an emergency shelter, kind of like a gymnasium, with hundreds and hundreds of other displaced people. So one torrential downpour is a nuisance and an annoyance, and for the other, it's tragic in terms of pretty much all their belongings are washed away. And so that you have this kind of unaware of how certain things impact different people based upon the economic status. But then you also see how maybe there's unconcern. And you see this at the climax of the film, where there is the tragic birthday party with the violence that just comes out of nowhere. And with the Kim family, the daughter has been stabbed and the father is attending to him, but he's also the driver for the rich, wealthy Park family. And the wealthy father is unconcerned about the stabbing victim. He just wants the driver to come drive him and his son to the hospital because he's had a seizure and he is unconscious. And to the point where he wants the person to leave the daughter, leave a dying young lady to serve him. And you just sort of see this lack of care and concern for other people that they don't see as equal to them. And you just see this microaggression through privilege, to where the Park patriarch will talk about smell or odor in a way that that he doesn't realize how demeaning and degrading that comes across to other people, because it fundamentally is devaluing them for something that they cannot help. They can't help because of their status and means, that they don't have fresh wash, that they can't have everything to the highest degree as the Park family. So then you get this concept of privilege, but then let's talk about structural inequality, because that's at the heart of this film. And not just with what is said and what happens, but even the visual landscape of this film. Let's talk about the geography, because you have the Kim family, and they live in a apartment or in a room, in a lot of ways, that's half underground. And so they only have a marginal view of the outside world, and then you have these tall structures around them that really blockades natural sunlight, clouds, things of that nature. And then you have the Park family that's up on a hill, and you see throughout the film them walking up to the home, and then the Kim family leaving the home and walking down. And the house is just a landscape of stairways, and you always are walking upstairs, and then there's these wide, minimalist rooms that are large, but they're sparse. There's not a lot in it. And the film talks about how the previous owner was an architecture, and so it was really about design. But what you see is you have the wealthy family living up on a hill, and you have the house that has plenty of stairs. Again, this moving upward, and then it creates a lot of empty space, to the point where it's really about creating distance. It's about having this ability to cut off and push away the outside world and the cares and ills that are going on out there. Whereas the Kim family, it's claustrophobic, it's cluttered. They even have the toilet up on almost like on a shelf, because that's the only way it can get access to sewage and things along those lines. And so with that, you have this cramped versus spacious. We learn halfway through the movie that there's even a bomb shelter that the Park family's even unaware that their home has an extra level beneath their basement that someone else has been living in for the last 4+ years. So again, they accumulate all of this space, this wealth, but it's really about creating distance, and with little concern for the millions of people around them that are cramped, that are suffering, that are poor, that are scraping by for ends meet each and every day. And so again, that's just sort of it's kind of a metaphor, right? It's so metaphorical. It's a metaphor for the structural inequality of Parasite and this society and culture, to where it's increasingly the haves and haves not, and we don't see the middle class, or even if there is a middle class, in the way that this director, Bong Joon-ho, is sort of examining modern Korean culture. And so when you think about the structural inequality, then it's really about the question of this social mobility, the ability to walk up those stairs. And this movie is really cynical, and it's kind of resigned and defeatist in the sense of belief or optimistic that people can move up into another social status. Because this whole film highlights this Kim family. And when they take on these new roles, even though they have to con themselves into it, they are smart and they are skilled, but they don't have these opportunities on their own. They have to con their way into it. They have to be spoken for somebody else. The family friend Min has to give them an opening, because talent and skill alone does not guarantee that you can move up in the social class. You need somebody already in there to speak to you. And then we see in this film, even when they move into the Park family and they're developing some means for themselves, one of the twists of the film is that the old housekeeper husband has been living in the bomb shelter basement for the past 4 years, and they ask, can they just still live there? And the Kim family turns on them. And so what we see is this system really where it's designed for the exploitation of other people, that there's really not enough room or opportunity for everybody to move upward, is that the lower class are fighting each other for the crumbs that are left to them by the wealthy or this class structure of society. And that ultimately is the message of this whole film about parasites. It's not that each of these families are, although we see how the Kim family, the Park family, and even the old housekeeper and her husband, they're all parasites. They exploit or live off the means of other people. But Bong Joon-ho is really, he's critiquing this whole economic system itself, that it is parasitic, and that everybody that participates in this culture and this structure of society can only do so by feeding off and exploiting other people, to the point where he feels very grim and hopeless that things will ever change, let alone change in his lifetime. The movie really has a powerful ending where the father who has murdered the Park father is now hiding in the bomb shelter himself, and he's trapped. He can't get out because he is a fugitive for murdering a wealthy businessman. And the son writes the dad a letter that he says to the audience about how his plan is that he's going to go to college. He's going to get a great job. He's going to earn enough money so that one day he can buy the house. And then his dad will be able to come up the stairs and come out of the darkness and be able to see light again and be free. And then we see that it's really just a daydream. It's a dream of his. It's a fantasy, because the movie ends with him reading this letter that, even though we see a scene of it happening, that it's all in his mind. It hasn't happened. Then the movie ends. And then there's a song. There's a song that plays at the end, and it's called Soju One Glass, and it's sung by the actor that portrays the Kim son. And originally the song title was 564 years, because that's what the director estimated how long it would take for the son to earn enough money to pay for that house to allow his dad to move up and out of the darkness. And so this movie is very grim in its belief that this system really allows people to move up in status, especially if it's parasitic, that the only way that people can even just survive is off the generosity or the lifeblood of other people, let alone move up. But that's kind of my take on Parasite. What about you? I don't really think there's heroes or villains, mostly victims in this, as well as perpetrators. But did you sympathize more with the Park or Kim family? Did you think that the housekeeper and her husband were done wrong? Leave me your take on the heroes and villains, the protagonists and antagonists of Parasite. Also, let me know what kind of themes you drew out of this metaphorical film, and if you picked up on other themes about classism or socioeconomic inequality. Be sure to leave your comments below. You can also leave me a recommendation of a film or television series you'd like for me to dissect here on Psych Cinema. That's going to do it for this episode. I'm Jonathan Hetterly. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you at the movies.